So I have a kind of bit of a problem with with the term of social architecture, because all architecture is social in a way. Um, People interact with the built environment every day. Most of the world is made by people rather than by architects, and at the same time, the only thing that separates architects from just being part of that world is this kind of concept of professionalization. So for me, social architecture perhaps is an ambition rather than an actual kind of reality, and that it has something to do with challenging ideas of an expert culture, of the kind of relationships between people who maybe commission architectural projects, between people who will then make those projects, between the labourer on site and the expert skilled maker. And I think architects are really trying to work out where they fit in. I think because this isn't in really. I think this is what like gets architects really like worried. You know, like you feel really guilty, like you know that you're not going to like solve the world's problems, and that the only thing you can do is on a community level, and that's like riddled with like ethical dilemmas, like you know just kind of parachuting in and like helping when they might not even have asked for your help or whatever. And working with collectors in Brazil, like I found like recently one of them, they're called Muda, which means change. And so she was saying like, you know, there's no point worrying about this, you just got to get out there and do something. And I think that's what you see amongst kind of architecture collectives that are emerging. This form of like working together as a more kind of horizontal practice is about being able to kind of reach out and just start doing things on a local scale. But working with the Community Land Trust in Liverpool, it's obviously really interesting to see how it suddenly we're sitting there designing a house, but we've had to think on the scale of the entire community and understand the history, because it was a very neglected area that's had a lot of kind of political problems and social problems, and so kind of to understand how our design practices on the scale of a house actually ties into an entire thinking on the scale of the city. And so I think the one thing that perhaps maybe in Assemble we do have is this notion that every action is political and has an implication which is political. And so understanding that across the scales is probably the kind of most important thing. Because I think if it ties back to that quote you had about you can't do anything, it's like, well, it's like the butterfly effect, right? It's like you do one small thing and then later you've got like a kind of industrial park and you're like, how did this happen? So I think it's more about a scale of thinking than a physical reality. So I think there's this idea of being complicit when you work with institutions and understanding their agenda compared to your agenda, and not seeing an institution, whether it's private or public, as something that will just is bigger than you and so is there to support you, and you're lucky if you can engage them. They represent us and they represent the way the world is built, and so they're there to be challenged. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to somehow like have an impact on, is not kind of just going and asking for space, but kind of dictating what's going to then happen in a longer term. So yeah, I think it's just like a kind of change in thinking, like a bigger scale.